Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on managing parenting and dementia research. I would like to start by acknowledging the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which I am today, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people throughout Australia, given that our webinar participants are coming from different places across Australia. For a lot of early to mid-career researchers, it is difficult to find a way to provide a family-life balance, along with managing a career in the competitive medical research sector. The aim of today's webinar is to have a discussion with a panel of successful dementia researchers on how they manage and any tips they may have. The webinar has been organised by the ADNeT Accelerator group, and our aim is to support and advocate for early and mid-career Australian dementia researchers and help to develop future research leaders. Just to know that this webinar is being recorded today and will be made available to view on the ADNeT webpage. I'm one of your chairs today, and my name is Aisha Milligan-Armstrong, and I'm a PhD candidate from Curtin University. I'm joined by my co-chairs, Dr. Stephanie Wong from Flinders University and Dr. Suraj Santani from UNSW as well. I will hand over to Stephanie now to introduce our first speaker, and we'll hear from each of our speakers about their experiences first, and then open up the floor to Q&A session. So please type any questions that you might have into the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the Zoom screen.
Okay, hi everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker today. So Dr. Celia Furia is a postdoctoral research scientist in the Lysosomal Health in Aging group at the Hopwood Centre for Neurobiology in the Lifelong Health theme at SAMRI, or the South Australian Health Medical Research Institute. So Celia completed her PhD in Bordeaux in France. Her current research focuses on how the relationships between the immune system and the lysosomal system can be targeted in neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. Celia is also a new mum to 5-month-old Valentin, and she's still currently on mat leave. So we're really lucky to have her here today to share her experiences. So Celia, I'll get you to turn on your camera and tell us a bit about your experiences.
Hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me to share my experience with you today. So yes, I became a first-time mom about 5 months ago. And so I'm still on maternity leave, so I can't really talk about managing research and parenting at the same time. But what I can talk about is how I planned my maternity leave and how I've been keeping in touch with work. So I guess that for planning maternity leave, there were 3 main points that were important to me. So the first one was that I wanted to be able to keep my research going while I was away. So although of course, I haven't been physically going to the lab, and so I'm a wet lab researcher, and I also do clinical research. So although I haven't been doing the research myself, I made sure that sample collection was still running, for example. So we have some clinical studies that started during my leave. And so what we made sure before I left was that we had all the ethics approved, that we had all the protocols in place, and that, for example, the research assistants working with us in the group were aware of how to collect the samples, how to process them, how to store them. And so this has been happening for the past few months. And so I already know that when I go back to work next month, I have some boxes of samples ready for me in the freezer that I can work with. And yeah, so I guess what was very important was to have everything ready before I left, and to have really good people working with us in the group who knew what to do to help me with my research while I was away. I was also lucky because I work with my partner, who is Julia, who he will be speaking next. So it's been much easier to keep track of what was happening, or if there were like if there was any troubleshooting or anything, we could have a chat about it, and he could fix the problems for me, I guess, or have the discussions with the relevant people at work. So because I was a first time mom, I really didn't know what to expect. And it's been pretty much more exhausting than what I expected. So I've planned everything in a way that I didn't have to do much while I was away. And my point of view was that I can keep doing research when I come back. I can keep writing paper. I will have other opportunities of applying for grants. But I won't have any other opportunity to spend that much time with my daughter, which was very important to me. So, and yes, and the last point was also that I planned to apply for an NHMRC IDEAS grant. And my daughter was born in March. So obviously it was not a good timing for that. But we organized everything in advance in a way that most of the grant application was returned before I left. I also talked to the research office at SAMRI, and they were really helpful in organizing a review panel before I started mat leave. And I was applying with Julien, so he kept working on the grant even when I was on leave, and finalized all the submission. But it was, I guess it's very important to talk to all the relevant people before you leave, organize everything so you have as little as possible to do when you're on leave. And yes, I haven't done anything related to work during the last few months, and I've only focused on spending time with my daughter and being with her as much as possible. So I guess that's my experience, and I'm going back to work next month. So then I will be able to talk about how it is to have a baby at home and to go back to work. So I guess that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. That's really interesting to hear about your experiences. And I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Julien Bensalem. Dr. Bensalem completed his PhD specialized in nutrition in 2014 at the University of Bordeaux, France. Dr. Bensalem joined the Lysosomal Health in Aging Hopwood Center for Neurobiology at SAMRI, Australia in 2018 as a postdoctoral research scientist. In his current role, he investigates how nutrition can be used to tackle dementia by improving autophagy. Julien is also Celia's partner and a new dad. Julien, please let us know what have been your experiences like and what are your tips for us?
Thanks, Raj. Yeah, so the experience, so yeah, Valentine is 5 months old, so it's pretty new. But yeah, actually it started before her birth, because of COVID, actually. We didn't want, of course, Celia, my partner, to get COVID while she was pregnant, just before giving birth. So I've been working from home a lot before that. I know some of you have done that like a lot, but it was already a big part impacting my work, so try to organize a lot of things while I was kind of away. And it's not a working from home when you can just go back one day once in a while. I was trying really to avoid people. Not that I don't like people. So yeah, it started like this before. And then, of course, you want to organize everything before you have your baby. So I was pretty lucky with SAMRI. We have 2 weeks of paternity leave. And then I also 2 extra weeks with the government that I actually took later. But I still had 3 weeks of leave after Valentine was born. And I reworked from home for a couple of days before going back to SAMRI. So yeah, I guess organizing everything before she was born was the main thing. As Celia said, in the group, we have very good research assistants. They're very helpful So yeah, all the lab work has to be organized, so had to be organized before. But also it was in March. So she was born end of February, but yeah, so the leave that I had was in March, and the NHMRC grants, as you know, are due beginning of May. Of course, you want to submit that to everyone before. So it was kind of a rush, but we worked hard to have most of the things done before that. And so we were able to submit the grant on time, and it was great. After that, so I came back in April, or end of March really, but April really at summary. Well, it was a busy time. Of course, you have to catch up on everything. So the grant was one of them. The lab work was kind of okay. I have a few clinical studies where I have to process blood samples. Of course, participants are booked in, so you don't have the choice. You have to be there. And when you have a baby at home, well, you're all tired, you're exhausted because they wake up in the middle of the night. It doesn't last too long at the beginning. We were lucky. Valentine started to do her nights very quickly. It's over now. She's not doing her nights anymore. But I guess that's parenting. So one thing I could say is if you are becoming a parent, you're going to be tired for a bit. And everyone is saying that it gets worse. So yeah. But yeah, we're also in a particular situation with Celia because we have our family in France, so we don't have a lot of family support. We have like good friends around, which is helpful. But you need to know how to manage your life with a baby and with work without having anyone else to help you really. Well, actually, it's not that hard. We are doing pretty well. So yeah, don't be scared about that. I know in Australia, we have a lot of people coming from overseas. It's totally manageable. Of course, like the workplace and your colleagues are the most important person for you in terms of work, because they will help you, they will take over for some things. Your supervisor is also a very important point. He will help you. So we have a very good supervisor with Celia. We can have like flexible hours. We can come a bit later, leave a bit early, manage our hours, work from home when we want. And so I've been working a lot from home since we had Valentine. So it helps, I don't know, just for a nap. So Celia can go for a nap and not do anything else, and I'm just there just in case. So it's just helping with the pressure. And yeah, so yeah, we're starting daycare now. It's been a few days. She's just staying at daycare for a couple of hours. But I guess it will help us to see things differently. So Celia is still on maternity leave, so she'll be able to do a few more things at home. But yeah, and one important thing is, yeah, I changed completely my lifestyle in the sense that I'm going to bed a lot earlier than before because I have to wake up anyway in the morning quite early. And yeah, finally, one important thing is, during my paternity leave, I didn't work really. I tried to have a real break and really enjoy having my daughter with me and enjoying every moment, because they go very quickly. Babies change like that. So yeah, I was still checking my emails just in case something was very important or urgent and I had to deal with it. But I just had a couple of things really. So yeah, every day, usually I think that it's very important to reply to everything and to be on the top of everything. You see when you're not there that actually people can do things without you, and it helps you to just release this pressure. And so yeah, so you can enjoy your life at home. So yeah, I think that's it for me, and we have a few questions at the end, so it will be yeah, I'll be there. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Julian. That's really insightful. So next up, we have Dr. Eleanor Drummond, who received her PhD from the University of Western Australia in 2012. And she worked as a postdoctoral fellow at Murdoch University and New York University School of Medicine in the USA, where she was appointed an assistant professor of neurology in 2014. She returned back to Australia in 2018 to become a group leader at the Brain and Mind Centre at the University of Sydney after receiving the Blue Sand Research Fellowship in Alzheimer's disease. The goal of Eleanor's research is to identify the early protein changes that drive the development of neurodegenerative disease so that new drug targets or biomarkers can be discovered. Eleanor is also mum to Isabel, who is 5, and Sophie, who has just turned 1.
Cool. Thanks so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I don't know if I have any tips to tell you how to do it all like amazing, but I'll tell you my experience. I'm a mum of 2, as you just heard, and I just returned from maternity leave with Sophie in February. And so I've actually had quite an interesting time because I've had 2 very different experiences. So Izzy was born when I was still in the States. And this is when I was a senior postdoc or like a research assistant professor working in someone else's lab. And so it was really interesting from the sense that I had a very short maternity leave. I was actually told multiple times that 3 months was amazing. And I was so lucky, which was really hard because 3 months is not long enough maternity leave. And I also didn't know what I was doing as a new mum. And then while there was a big interruption to my productivity at a kind of a pivotal time in my postdoc, it was because I was working in someone else's lab while I was still supervising students, I didn't have to be in charge of a lot of things that I was for Sophie. For example, grant reporting, ethics, all the day-to-day lab management stuff. So I moved back to Sydney when Izzy was 1.5. And then Sophie was born last June. So that came with its own set of challenges, and it was kind of along the, both home and work challenges. The home challenges where it was the middle of a pandemic. It really sucked. I'm sure everyone else here could appreciate that. But then from a work point of view, and also I was a mum of 2. So, that having 2 kids is just its own new juggle. It's very fun, but it is definitely more of a juggle. From a work point of view, it was also interesting because I was running my own lab. I was now that point person for a lot of stuff. Universities are not set up for people going on maternity leave. Australia is heaps better than America because you get more leave, but the grant reporting doesn't stop. The ethics reporting doesn't stop. You have people that you're supervising. So leave requests even don't stop. And if you're running the lab, it's kind of tricky to delegate a lot of that stuff. I did as much as I could, but there's only so much you can do. So I've pointed out a few of the challenges there, but I wanted to stress to anyone out there who might be thinking of having kids and thinking, what the hell am I doing? Am I going to ruin my career? I would not change what I've done for a second. Having my family is the best thing. And I was really worried that I would ruin my career in doing so, especially in America. Because, fast-paced life and you have to be there all the time and all of that kind of stuff. But that's not true. You can do both, and it's just about managing it. So in terms of tips, very happy to talk about this more in the questions, but quickly, some of the things I was thinking about. First thing is work out what you want. There is no perfect solution. I'm going to give you a whole lot of advice. Other people will give you different advice. Just work it out as you go. None of us really know what we're doing, and we're just, hoping that it works out. Do you want to work full-time or part-time? Now, I'm working full-time and I really like that decision. It works for me. I can separate work and family a bit more, but other people seem to really like working part-time. So it's kind of up to what you want. What are your non-negotiable career goals for the first 3 years of your kid's life? Because that is the hardest time. Like for me, I wanted to start my own lab. That was really hard when I had a 1.5-year-old and was moving across countries, but I still did it. And it's worked out really well. So you'll be faced with challenges, but you can make it work. The second thing, my second point is the most important thing I found as a working mum is to find a support system to help with your childcare. This might be a partner who stays home. That would be incredible. My partner, who is also incredible, works full-time as well. So we do 50-50 where we can when we don't have our external childcare. We have no family support in Sydney. So when we're in New York, when we're here, we had no one else to help us. All of my extended family and my husband's extended family are in Perth. So we rely on full-time daycare. Now, when I first started Izzy in full-time daycare, I got a lot of guilting. Comes from the parents, right? Well, your parents. And so they sometimes were saying, oh, are you really sure you want to do that and miss out on this special time with your child? And I had a lot of guilt, but then I put Izzy in daycare and she loved it. And Sophie is exactly the same, and they're thriving. And that makes me feel so much better. And also because they like it so much, then that works for me. That obviously isn't going to work for everyone else. And so again, it's about finding a system that works for you. This might be a partner, it might be family members, it might be working part-time. So just test it out and work out what you love. Another point, you have to be flexible. Kids get sick all the time. Once you go back to work, I'm sorry, Celia and Julian, you think it's all going to be great. I'm going back to work. I have all of my plans. And then suddenly, bam, get a call from daycare. Please come and pick up your child. They have a fever. Then at the moment, especially during winter, they pick up every single thing. So suddenly you have to drop everything at a moment's notice, including experiments, including grants, including important meetings, and go and take care of your child, because that's most important. My favorite memory is having to stop writing my career interruption statement for one of my grants mid-sentence because daycare was closing and I had to go and get Izzy. So talk about ironic. But the good side of this is that you get crazy efficient very quickly. My suggestion is don't work right up until a deadline. Try and get things done beforehand. And also plan your experiments accordingly. Just keep in mind, have a backup plan in place for childcare arrangements if you have an experiment that you really need to get done and you have to be there in person. The one thing that you lack, the major thing you lack as a working parent, is time. If you're in a position to, buy this time any way you can. I got some really great advice that I appreciated when I was pregnant in New York. From a more senior person who said, look, you just need to find yourself some time, if you can, and you can afford it, live close to everywhere you need to go so you can get that time back from commuting. And that is advice that I've really taken on board. And so I pay a premium to live close to the University of Sydney, and I live in a tiny house instead of a big, beautiful house. But that is totally worth it because I can walk to work, I can walk to daycare, I can walk to school, I can walk to the doctors, I can walk to the shops, and suddenly you're buying that time back. So if you can, do that. I understand that could be difficult for a lot of people as well, but just look for opportunities like that. Also, even little things, if you can afford it, get a cleaner, get the shopping delivered, just save time where you can, because that time you want to spend doing fun things with your kids. So, and then my last point that I have on here is go easy on yourself. Recognize that you're trying to manage 2 full-time jobs, and they are both hard and they both come with overtime, and often they overlap. There are things that you want to do. You might want to go to your kid's special party at school during working hours. You want to still be able to do that. Or you want to be able to do a seminar or something, an international seminar, or be involved in an international collaboration that involves 6 a.m. meetings. Work out what your priorities are and fit them in. There is a way to manage these things. People always say you can't do everything, but I think that you can. I think you can do the things that you want to do if you prioritize it. It's just a matter of selecting. Also, scientists are typically perfectionists. I have gotten used to the fact, and it's really helped me, that I don't have to submit things that are 100% amazing. My 80% often is about other people. I'd like to think it's pretty close to other people's 100%, or at least people don't complain about my 80%. So again, save time and yeah, go easy on yourself because it's a juggle, but it's a fun juggle. All right, that's all from me.
Thanks so much, Eleanor. I love the practical tips as well, and that's really good, really fantastic. Next up, we have Associate Professor Alex Baha-Fuchs. He's a Principal Research Fellow in the Academic Unit for Psychiatry of Old Age in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Melbourne, as well as a clinical neuropsychologist in private practice. He is a recognised international expert on cognition-oriented treatments for older adults, and his research in this area has been published in leading academic journals. After graduating from his PhD at Monash University, Alex completed postdoctoral training at the ANU and also at the Sheba Medical Centre in Israel before joining the Academic Unit for Psychiatry of Old Age at the University of Melbourne in 2017, where he co-heads the Cognitive Interventions, Technologies and Evaluations, or CITE research group. Alex has been awarded several prestigious prizes, grants and awards, including a Churchill Fellowship, and his work has been supported by the NHMRC and Dementia Australia. Alex is also a dad to Noam, who's 14 years old, and Evie, who is 6 years old. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. Kind of felt a bit funny being regarded as a successful dementia researcher because of my particular circumstances that I'm actually potentially facing the end of the at least full-time research career as things stand at the moment. But I'll try not to be too depressing in my short introduction. I guess my sort of career, I'm also a clinical neuropsychologist by training. So I spent the first couple of years after my PhD training and becoming an accredited neuropsychologist. By the time I started my postdoc in 2011 at the ANU, I already had 2 boys under 3. So there's a lot of challenges around, obviously, starting my research career in a postdoc when you have 2 children under 3, which those of you who've had kids of that age know that sort of the addition of a second child to the first child, especially when they're both under 3, feels like much more than doubling of all the challenges and efforts. The key sort of themes around my parental challenges have been around, first of all, having, raising 2 young children with a partner who, at least in my case, is now an ex-partner who is an equally busy professional. So compared to maybe some other parents who might have the ability to lean at certain periods of time more on the other person, for us, it was very, very challenging, both at the family living in Canberra without any family supports, but also having 2 incredibly busy and demanding professional careers. The other sort of set of challenges that I think is also shared by some of the other speakers is the frequent mobility. So we've moved 3 times as part of my work to Canberra, to Israel, and then back to Melbourne. And each of those periods, especially with young children, is associated with a lot of challenges around resettling and finding, the childcare or school systems and housing and so on. So all of these have had a significant impact on continuity of research networks, on ability to supervise students, and basically sort of had a significant impact on productivity. I guess Eleanor mentioned the kids do get sick, and they get sick a lot. Sadly, in rare circumstances, they get very sick. And in my personal story, my second child actually had cancer and passed away while living abroad and working on my NHMRC early career fellowship. So that was a significant life event that really derailed, I suppose, for a while, my ability to focus on work, and really forced me to basically step away from work for a substantial amount of time to focus on caring for my son Eli while he was sick, and also supporting my ex-partner. Then we had Evie, our 3rd child, who was born while overseas and just before returning to Melbourne. And I guess maybe reflecting my slightly sort of more advanced stage of the journey, I've also been dealing with single parenting for the last 3 years, or half single parenting since my partner and I separated. And I guess that introduces, again, a whole set of challenges to kind of juggling work, specifically in research and parenting. So I guess from my perspective, while like Eleanor, I wouldn't have changed anything, and I didn't plan kind of to have the children at a particular time to suit around my research or my job stability and so on. It certainly introduced a substantial amount of challenges, but at the same time, working in a research environment and universities, we do need to make the most out of the reasonably flexible work conditions that we have. and try and essentially work the system as best as we can so that we can focus on raising our young children. And I absolutely can't stress enough how easy it is with the kind of all-consuming nature of research and its competitive nature to get sucked up completely with that and miss on very, very important stages and milestones of our children's development. And, you know, those of us who have been parents for long enough know that it goes away very quickly. And before we know it, we've got teenage children. So I really encourage people to, from a very early stage, really, as Eleanor said, sort of think about their boundaries, think about what sort of sacrifices they're prepared to make, use all the resources available without being ashamed of simplifying, reducing, at least for me, reducing or minimizing commuting, outsourcing things like housework and cleaning and so on was absolute lifesaver. And yeah, that's, I think, summarizes my experiences. I'm not sure I'm going to have any major tips for young parents out there, but I'll do my best.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing your experiences. So next, I'd like to introduce Maureen Irish. So Maureen is a professor of cognitive neuroscience in the School of Psychology and at the Brain and Mind Centre at the University of Sydney. So originally from Ireland, Maureen completed her PhD at Trinity College in Dublin before relocating to Australia in 2010 and establishing the Mind Research Team. Maureen's research focus is the cognitive neuroscience of memory and dementia, and to date she's produced over 150 publications and received over $4 million in competitive research funding. Her work is obviously very high quality and it's been recognized by many major awards from almost every society in her field, including the 2017 L'Oreal UNESCO International Rising Talent Award, the 2019 CNS Young Investigator Award, the 2020 Elizabeth Warrington Prize, and the 2020 Gottschalk Medal from the Australian Academy of Science. And of course, Maureen is also a strong advocate for diversity in science on many platforms, and she's really committed to the promotion and retention of women in science. And of course, Maureen is also the proud mother of 2 boys. So Fionn, who is 8, and Ashin, who is 4. So Maureen, if you want to share your experiences and offer any tips.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is such a great forum, even for, I guess, more seasoned parents and researchers, just to hear about the experiences of other people and to realize that we all have different backgrounds and different circumstances, but actually the challenges are quite universal. And I think, everyone here has already touched on some of the things that I was going to mention. But I think as well, one of my big sort of strongest points that I would like to emphasize is there is no right way to do this and there is no wrong way to do this. And you just have to muddle out and find a path that suits you and your family the best. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that I cannot compare myself to other people. My situation is different, my challenges are unique, and I just have to forge the best path that I can with what I have and try and do my best for my boys. So I think I'm probably a good example of doing the pregnancies right and doing the maternity leave completely wrong. So I planned my pregnancies. I was terrified of losing momentum with my research. So I had had a big career break before I relocated to Australia, and I was trying desperately to claw my way back in. And then I managed to secure an ARC fellowship at DECRA, and then thought, I'm going to do it now. It's like, bite the bullet. Let's just have a baby funded by the ARC. Let's go. So I knew I had 3 years to catch up following the maternity leave. And that was always on my radar. It's like, I've got 3 years, I'll try and recoup the loss, which is just a crazy way to go into having a child. Anyway, so Fionn came along. I had worked like an absolute demon up until like my water's breaking, which I don't advise because it didn't put me in a better position later on. I was answering emails on the day he was born on my phone in the hospital bed. Again, stupid. Do not do this. It didn't get me anywhere. It just made me look like I was a lunatic. And gradually I started realizing that I was going to have to make some compromises. And I think one thing we haven't really talked about is just how much as a researcher, your own sense of self is like tied up in your work. And like, we're all really personally invested. And like, this is almost like a vocation for many of us. And having to stop and not do that anymore and completely switch to a different mode of being, I found that really, really difficult. So, you know, I wasn't sleeping when the baby was sleeping. I was like trying to run a bit of neuroimaging, or I was trying to like write a grant or something. And I ended up being like really exhausted by the time I got back to work following the 6 months of leave. So that first year back is tough. As Eleanor and Alex have both said, children get sick all the time in daycare. It's really difficult. You get into work, you're ready to go, and then you get a call from daycare and you have to go. And that can put a lot of strain on your relationship as well. And like others, I don't have any family here. They're in a different hemisphere. So I couldn't even contact my family when I wanted to get advice or anything because they were all asleep. It's just trying to muddle through as best you can and get support from outside services if you need to. There is no shame in that. It's like, ask for what you need. And the same with colleagues as well. And that was something I was quite poor at on my first maternity leave, was I didn't reach out to colleagues to let them know what I needed. And they weren't mind readers. So I don't know how they could have anticipated or known what I was needing, but it left me feeling a little bit isolated from my group and also feeling like people had forgotten about me. And that's a really horrible feeling, coupled with the isolation when you're on maternity leave as well. So I think if you want to stay in touch and let people know what you need. So following that year, when I got back into work, I had a very successful year outwardly. I ended up completely burning out by the end of that first year back. And not a lot of people know this, but then I took time off because I was just completely physically and emotionally burnt, like to the core, and realizing that I couldn't sustain this high level of like working and this sort of high level of like ultra parenting. I was trying to do everything well and I was kind of failing on all fronts. And I took some time off and then came back with a better model of how I was going to be as a mom. And, you know, in my time away from the office, that was my time with Fionn. And in my time in the office, I tried to protect my research time as much as I could, blocking out days in my calendar where I could do some writing and just being more open with, you know, supervisors and mentors about what I needed. I also did like a women in leadership course during that time. And that was brilliant because it really built me back up as a person. And there was one-on-one coaching sessions that sort of got me back on track and made me realize that, you know, I hadn't taken a hit to my CV. We can't keep looking at children as like this interruption and break. I had just added something into the mix that actually really enhanced my life. You know, so we have to stop looking at children as the ultimate disruption. It's a choice we've made, and it's one that ultimately has completely embellished and enriched everything I do, even in my work. So it really got me to reframe how I was thinking about, you know, career disruption, collecting from daycare. All of these things are temporary, but, you know, the relationship that you have with your children, that's permanent. So then I was gun shy about having a second child because I had been so, you know, kind of scarred from that first experience and so burnt out. So there's a 4-year gap between the two boys, which coincidentally coincides with an ARC Future Fellowship. So as soon as I got my Future Fellowship, I thought, okay, I'm just going to do it. The ARC wants me to reproduce. I'm just going to do it. So Oisín was born as a result of my Future Fellowship. And this time I went in a lot more determined to protect my time with Oisín. I took 9 months of leave, which I haggled for with the university. And again, you learn how to negotiate much better, knowing, you know, that you have a family that you want to be there for. And I made a lot more clear boundaries, even though, as Eleanor said for her second, I was now a group leader. I had a number of PhD students and staff relying on me. I still had much more time to myself and was much more productive during that time than I was on my first mat leave, when really it was just me driving the projects. So you also learn to push back, I think. Those early years as your children grow, it's a juggle and they start to need you in very different ways. And I think they need you more as they enter their schooling years. So then you have all the emotional challenges of your children interacting with other people who may not necessarily be nice out in the real world. You have to help with homework. You have to be there for school, you know, plays and school, you know, parents' races and bake sales. And that's something that I want to do because I have that flexibility. My parents were never able to attend things that I went to. And it's something very important to me that I'm there and I'm one of the mums that's there. And I love that I have a job where I work later on and I can make up that time, but I want to be there for Fionn at school when he has things that are important for him. COVID and homeschooling was the absolute lowest point of my parenting experience. It was extremely difficult. I was basically homeschooling all day, 6 hours a day with Fionn, and then working into the small hours of the night, trying to get things written up and grants in. And it just was a horrible time. And I think anyone who was looking after children, old or young at that time, it was really, really difficult. Again, all of these things, I'm going to sound like some mindfulness guru, but these experiences are fleeting. They do change. Your children will change. And I think it just becomes more important to me, at least, to, you know, cultivate them as little people and model that my work is not the most important thing to me, but it is important that mummy does a good job, but also that they're the most important thing to me, and to not let my work bleed into my time with them. Again, so just some tips. One of my biggest tips is tune out the advice that is not relevant for you. So put a filter on, just like when you're going through pregnancy, you will get all of these suggestions and inane pieces of advice. Take what you think will work for you and filter the rest right out, because nobody gets to comment on your situation or your circumstances. You pick what you want to do, trial a few things, and whatever works for you, that's your call. You're not answerable to anyone else but your family unit. One thing that I remember was a bunch of more senior colleagues that I was working with had said, oh, when you have children, you cannot travel internationally until they're at least 5 or 6. You know, it's just out of the question. And I remember being really disgruntled by that because I wanted to be able to go to meetings and meet my colleagues. And that was really important to me. And so I went to conferences, I think when both boys were about 9 months, and you can apply for, you know, grants through your university or institute. You can get childcare in to help out. And if you don't have family living with you, it was really important to me to go and feel like my own self again. And so I went to Vancouver, I think, when Fionn was 9 months, and I went to Canada as well, Toronto, when Oisín was about 5 months, and gave talks, went and met colleagues and came back feeling absolutely energized and enriched again. I think, as Eleanor has said already, another little mantra I have is done is better than perfect. We can't be perfectionists anymore. You just have to get the things done and ticked and you move on. And also, if you are late on something or if you can't undertake a task, you know, no one is going to die. We're not surgeons. We have to reframe the importance that we're ascribing to certain tasks. Like, if you can't review a paper on time, it's okay, just ask for an extension. Or if you get asked to, you know, take part in something that you're ultimately not able to do, use it and pass it on to somebody else. That's what I like to do, is to give the opportunity on to somebody else if I can't. And at least, you know, it will go to a good place and someone else will benefit from, you know, the fact that you can't do it. And finally, don't compare yourself to others. That is the most harmful thing I think any of us can do, is to try and look at somebody else's situation and make comparisons based on what you're only seeing on the surface. It's ultimately just going to destroy your self-esteem. Just focus on your own experience. Focus on the fact that you made a choice, that you wanted to be a parent, and focus on the fact that we're in a situation that allows us to have that flexibility. It's unbelievable. I just always think of my parents as teachers not being able to attend anything that I did, and that I can be there. It's such a luxury. And I think we need to sort of look more at the positives as well. You know, that's easier said than done. And I think finally, last take-home message is, it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to build an academic career. And I think we have to get better about asking for help, looking to our colleagues and seeing who needs support, who can I help, who can I bring onto a grant, who can I bring onto a paper, who can I give opportunities to. And that's kind of where I've shifted my emphasis, is more looking to see who can I help now that I'm through that pipeline and coming out the other side of, you know, the baby phase, which is so intense. So I hope that was helpful, Steph.
Thank you for your experiences and sharing them with us. And thank you to our panel for your insightful tips. for managing work-life balance in the research environment. I think everyone here will take something away from it. We're now going to open up for questions. We have a few that we have collected prior to today's webinar. But if people in the audience have questions, please write them in the chat function and we will ask them for you. And now I'll just ask all the panel members to please switch on their camera for the Q&A.
Okay, so I'll go with the first question. For our wet lab researchers in particular, you obviously have to do like time course experiments, drugs have to go onto cells certain times, et cetera, et cetera. So that can sometimes have you coming in at ridiculous times of the day or night. If you have to do that, are there any practical difficulties that you've experienced and how you've overcome any of those in particular?
If I could take that, sorry. So with this question, it is a really important thing, and the answer is probably not what you think I'm going to say, but as researchers, if we're not working, let's rephrase. If you're in a position to, don't do those experiments. I saw this question and I was just like, oh, how can I answer this well? But the thing is that we're in a position where you can sometimes pivot. Look at COVID. Look at the way that we've managed to pivot what we want to do, what we want to focus on. Maybe I think it's probably the most sensible thing to do if you can, to look at that and pivot that one into 2 years time and focus on something else. Someone else might have actual practical tips, but I just stopped doing all of those experiments.
No, that's good. That was a good tip. Has anyone else got anything to add to that, or we can go to the next one?
Ask someone else to do them. Yeah, I mean, without kidding, for me, it's a bit like that. So we've got very good research assistants. So I like to say that I'm not working for me, but with me. It really works this way. If you have a good relationship with the people you work with, no matter which level really, they'll help you when you need them, and you're going to do that for them too, or if not already done. So yeah, we have actually experiments like this where we have research assistant. They have to go someone, but actually here it's a research assistant. She had to come in the middle of the night to fast some mice, so we could kill them in the morning, fasted. Of course, like you have flexible hours, you do some arrangements. She's not coming in the morning after that. You change the hours. So that's something that actually everyone could do. But yeah, a good supervisor is helpful, and good people to work with helps a lot.
So it looks like we have a question from the in the panel and Q&A box. So Genevieve asks, breastfeeding mamas on the panel. So how did you juggle breastfeeding and returning to work, particularly those who might still be breastfeeding toddlers?
Mine was tricky. So obviously for Izzy, she was 3 months old when I returned to work. I was still breastfeeding her exclusively for the first 2 months. It was really hard. America is really well set up with lactation rooms. And so you go off and there's a special room and you sit there and stuff. But the thing is that 3 times a day during an 8-hour day times, let's go with at least half an hour, usually 45 minutes when you factor in, the getting there, getting back. That was tricky. It really stressed me out, and this is why I was so for Sophie, for my second, I made the decision to stop breastfeeding her before I came back to work. That's a personal decision. Obviously, lots of people continue to breastfeed while they're still at work, but I didn't have to face that issue for the second.
Great. Well, we might move on to another question from the list that we kind of thought about before. Well, based on all of your experiences, do you think there are any things that the universities or research institutes could do more to make it easier for working parents? I'll leave it to whoever can jump in.
Yeah, one for me would be more paternity leave. I don't know, we talk about diversity and like inclusion and women in science. I mean, parenting is, you need two people for that. And it's not really fair that the woman has to do all the job, take 6 months off, or sometimes like 3 months and go back to work and miss some parts. The dad can do that too. So there is one thing that you can do with Centrelink, and you can actually take some paternity leave. So you change the primary carer, but of course you don't have the same salary. So people choose not to do that most of the time. But yeah, I've got actually our neighbor is dad of a 9 months old. I think he had 4 months of paternity leave as a dad. So that's great. I know it doesn't help for like work things and how to do more when you have less time. But yeah, if we had that, it would also help the mothers to like cope a bit more, because it's exhausting, really. So you can cope with it, and people won't say it's exhausting, but it is in different ways. I mean, just without a kid, working in science can be exhausting. So add another, full job to that, and you'll see. So yeah, for me, that's one part. But also, I don't know, I like to be really involved. Some partners are not like that, but for me, it's important to be there. So yeah, so more paternity leave.
Great. And Alex, I think you had something you wanted to say as well.
I just wanted to add that I think that thinking about various models of mentorship in the early stages of one's academic career that potentially are a little bit tailored to one's circumstances and allow them to think about different pathways. For example, when I started my postdoc, that was a funded postdoc at the ANU, but I jumped very quickly to looking at fellowships that I'll be building my own research program while sort of juggling the parenting young children. Once you're in that sort of pathway of your own independent program, you're there. You have to, for example, another way of doing it would be to seek for another funded postdoc for another year or two, and not necessarily want to jump into building my own independent research program at that early stage. And I think trying to strike a balance between activities that are around building your own research program as opposed to activities that make you part of other people's work as part of building your track record is important. I kind of had it drilled into me very early on to focus on building my own program.
Great. That's really helpful. I think, there's a couple of ways. I might start with Maren first, and then Eleanor, and then Celia. Yeah, Maren.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues is that you don't know what you need until you look back in hindsight, and then you realize that that would have actually been really useful at the time. And so that's what I think, universities could be more mindful, or even research institutes, of, like, as Alex has kind of suggested, like better mentorship, or pairing more senior people who've come through the ringer, can actually look back and help someone, who is contemplating starting all of this off, because there are so many pitfalls and decisions, and just even having a little bit of knowledge is so much more empowering than going into it blind. And yet there are so many people out there, as we know, we can see here, who've gone through this and actually could offer some very useful advice. So back after my first child, I actually set up a mothers in science support group at Neura, and we all met like once a month, and just, we lobbied for funding to get better return to work grants. We kind of just shared experiences, shared tips, and then we had some members who came along who were pregnant, who were actually able to ask and discuss about what might lie ahead, how might I deal with this, what's your suggestions? And I think it's just sort of like breaking down the unknown and just being a bit more transparent about, yes, it is hard, but there are certain things you don't have to do. There are other courses that you can take. Everything, it's not either or. It's, you might delay some goals that you had for yourself, but they'll still be there when you're ready for them, and when things are a little bit less in flux. So I think it's just having those sounding boards is very, very useful, rather than feeling like I'm going to have a child, I'm going to fall off the grid and everyone's going to forget about me. You know, there's so many of us out there. It's, you know, and I like, just to say, I'm very happy if anyone wants to contact me for what it's worth. Yeah, just to, I guess, demystify the process.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Maren. And Eleanor, you had something to say?
Maren, I totally agree with everything you just said. If I had that with my first, it would have been made life so much easier. Universities hate me, or senior leadership hate me whenever they ask questions like this, because they're like, Eleanor, choose something that doesn't include money. But the thing is that if you think about, there are probably three things. The first one is you want to maintain your research progress, right? Imagine how amazing it would be if you could have someone who could, like a research assistant or something. Not everyone has grant funding to have a person continue their research as you go through. You want to maintain that continuity. You want, that gives you a sense of, you know, ownership of the research as well. You want to come back to work, which surely the universities want you to do. And so having those kind of grants to support you with staff while you're actually on leave to continue your research would be amazing. The second one is this is a, I don't know if this is a University of Sydney thing. Some universities have an issue where they provide maternity leave for people on research only contracts, but they don't provide the on costs, which means that your boss or yourself still has to pay 30% of your salary while you're on leave. That doesn't create an amazing situation when you're asking for leave. You're like, but I have government mandated or union mandated, whatever, maternity leave. Having that coverage would be amazing. So people at the University of Sydney are now talking about this, because some of us have argued loudly about it, and it's not a situation you want to be in. The third thing was an interesting thing out of the States. I still don't know if it's good or not, but I did use it, where they were really promoting people to be working. And so when your child was sick and got kicked out of daycare, they actually had New York University subsidized babysitters who could come in for $12 a day to your house to take care of your child so you could still be at work. They only gave you this for like 10 days a year, but that was an amazing service, because the babysitters knew that, like, this is when your child has a cold, so they can't be in daycare, but they're not incredibly sick. That was amazing. But I've never heard of this outside of the States. But that, you know, again, all my things cost money, but those things would have really helped.
Wow, yeah, I've never heard of the university funded babysitting. That's amazing. And also $12 a day. That's also a bit questionable.
Oh no, so the university paid the rest. I paid $12. The university paid them heaps more.
Okay, right. Well, that's good to know. But yeah, okay. Moving on to Celia, did you have something to add about, you know, what other things research institutes or universities can do to help?
Yes, and I guess it's also related to dads. I know that there are some big companies who they give the same amount of leave to dads and to moms, which means that when you decide to have kids, it doesn't matter if you're a woman or if you're a man. And I know that for me, for example, it was important because I am on 1-year contracts. I'm a postdoctoral researcher. So it means that when I decided to have a family, I didn't really know what would happen to my contract, because you don't know when you get pregnant, you don't know how it's going to affect work. I'm lucky because I knew that with my team leader, it wouldn't really change anything and that my contract would be renewed anyway. But it means that when you're looking for a job or when you want your contract to be renewed, it doesn't matter if you are a woman or if you are a man, which means that the employer or the team leader, they know that whoever they decide to have on their team, there's a chance that this person is on leave for a certain amount of time, and it's the same amount of time for everyone. And I think it's quite important because it means, you know, everyone starts from the same level and there's more equity, and whoever decides to build a family can do it the same way.
Yeah, great. That would be fantastic. I hope universities are listening to this, maybe. Okay, do we have any other questions? Anyone wants to pop in? Oh, Maureen, you want to say something?
Sorry, I just wanted to say, like, on the topic of dads, I think we're talking about whole cultural change that needs to happen, though, because even in institutions where they do offer paternity leave, I don't know, like my husband was offered 4 weeks, which he took, but he paid a penalty for taking those weeks. So he was chucked off committees because he had other priorities. And they were very clear about that his, focus had shifted and that he was off, in the land of like baby fun. And I think we just, like, despite them offering these very good incentives, the whole culture within his team was like extremely, it was like a cost, and we suffer the cost too. We know there's a motherhood penalty, but I just think there's something about this cultural change that needs to happen more broadly to enable men to actually feel like this is something that they can do safely and something that isn't going to result in like a backlash later on. I know women do have this the whole time, but I just thought it was interesting that on both occasions when he took the 4 weeks, he was under terrible pressure to still go in. He paid a few like prices with different committees and things, and yeah, it wasn't as inclusive as the policy and the financial provision sort of made out.
Yeah, it really speaks to a much wider cultural issue, as you said, and I don't know what we can do from the ground up to really change that, but I hope that by talking about these issues and raising awareness, that can do something to help spark change.
I've got one more. I find really interesting that you planned your pregnancies for when you had your fellowships. Did anybody else do that, or was it just sort of it just sort of happened and you worked your career around it, or was it very much planned when you were going to have your children? Yeah, Celia, if you want to go.
So I guess that's something very important, is that you can't really plan a pregnancy, because like for some people it would take 2 months and for some people it would take 3 years. So I wouldn't really suggest plan your pregnancy based on whether you have your fellowship or not, because you don't know when it's going to happen and you don't know how it's going to happen. For some people it's more challenging. For some people they plan for it to be challenging and they are really surprised by how quick it is. So yes, I think it's a bit tricky. I know that for us, I could see that there was no fellowship coming anytime soon. So as I said before, I was on 1-year contracts, but I guess we just decided that, whatever happened, we were ready to deal with it. So financially, and also we were mentally ready. And we were like, whatever happens, and we'll manage it. And we were 2 people with short-term contracts, but we also knew that we would be able to, to keep working in the same group if we worked hard enough and if we wanted to. But yes, for us, it wasn't really an option to wait for a fellowship, and especially, we are living in a different country. So we did our PhDs in France, then moved to Australia, moved through different institutes. So I think, yes, it's a bit hard to plan it this way. It depends on people, but for us it was more, are we ready? Do we have the life that, are we able to raise a child the proper way?
Does anyone else have anything to add to that one, or go to the next?
So in terms of planning, I got some great advice, I guess, from my old supervisor when I was pregnant with my first, who said there's never a good time and for me to stop stressing out. So like you want to plan. I get scientists want to plan. It just makes sense, right? There are some perfect times to have a baby and you can by all means aim. But what Celia is saying is totally right. Things are outside of your control. You might have a miscarriage. It happens a lot more commonly than people talk about. You might take a really long time to get pregnant, and then all the plans are out the window. By all means, you can work, like kind of map out the general time where you think it would be great. And often if you get a fellowship, then yeah, that's a really great time to have a baby. But the thing is that also consider this as your family. If you want to have a baby, then it's about priorities. It's you make your family work for you, not make your family work for your career, because that's like your family is the most important thing. And you try and keep on to your career as much as you can, obviously, as you're going through. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Sorry, so I did say at the start, I'm not advocating that this is the way to do it, because this is the way I did mine. So I did get fellowships and then said, this is the time where I want to do it. And I must be super fertile because it happened within a month both times. So that's quite lucky. But I think, again, I would just say you have to make the choice depending on your own circumstances. You can't look to somebody else and say, that's how they did it. That's not how this works. And I would hate for anyone to take away from this seminar that we're telling you the right time to plan out the most major decision that you'll ever make in your life, because that would be absolutely, you know, foolhardy of us to even recommend. So I think it's just, you have to look at where you are. Like Celia said, what are your circumstances, and are you mentally ready, and are you financially ready? Because that's a huge commitment as well when you think about daycare costs. Yeah. And then it's just a case of, you know, what's going to work for you in your circumstances. And what worked for me was knowing that I had that time, knowing that that was probably the most stable part of an, you know, when you're on short-term contracts, the beginning of a 3 and a 4-year fellowship was the best time for me to do it as a research only fellow. So yeah, again, in no way would I say go and get yourself a DECRA and then have a baby, because it's just not that simple for everyone. But for me, that was the best decision. So I hope my words are not going to get misconstrued here.
If I could carry babies, I would also try and have it at the start of my fellowship. But unfortunately, I tried and failed.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions in the Q&A chat or chat sections?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I thought it was important, so I wanted to say this during this webinar. I've heard, someone told us once that we had to choose. It was actually towards Celia, so that a woman had to choose between a career and a family in science. Don't listen to these people. It's not true at all. You can have a very good career, and I think actually here we have like very good panelists showing that it's completely possible to have kids in science and have a brilliant career in science and in dementia research too. So yeah, just don't listen to that. It's possible.
And don't say it to other people. Because yes, I think I was about 10 weeks pregnant, and nobody knew about it. And someone told me, oh, you know, when you're a woman in science, you just have to choose not to have kids. So don't say that.
Not taking away from the fact that it's absolutely true what you're saying, and it's just seen in the context of what is sometimes seen as an unsustainable system, at least here when it comes to the way funding works and the actual real chances of a person, male or female, who are devoting not, you know, most of their time to chasing grants and fellowships to stay in a research environment. You know, that's just the other side of that conversation. So while I fully agree that that's completely wrong on any level to suggest to anybody that that's not possible, the other side of that conversation needs to continue being about, well, how do we create a reality where people don't have to work until 3 a.m. in the morning when they put their kids to bed to chase their next fellowship or grant so that they actually have a job.
Actually, that brings me to a question that we haven't prepared, that I was thinking would be interesting to hear about, is the whole idea of, you know, juggling work and childcare responsibilities and family life and everything. What is a typical day for each of you, and how do you divide up your time? Or is a typical day like just a myth? There is no such thing as a typical day. Really curious to find out.
I don't know if you really want to know our typical days, Steph. Do you really want to know?
It's carnage. It's
I
absolute
know.
carnage.
We look so good and polished when we come to work, right? Everything's
No.
totally under control. No. So we spend, if you have school age kids, you spend about 2 hours in the morning yelling things like, put your shoes on, put your shoes on. And then you make some lunch and, you know, it takes, like, you've got 2 hours of chores first thing in the morning. Then you make your way to work. I personally love getting to work. I sit in my office and I'm like, oh, this is so relaxing. I'm not taking care of children. And then, yeah, so for me, I try really hard to work between 9 and 5, and like, so daycare hours and school hours. My school age daughter is also in aftercare, so I can pick her up same kind of hours as daycare, so pick them both up at just after 5, have another 2 hours of chores, like of the crazy 5:30 till 7:30 of have a bath. Why aren't you in the bath yet? Sorry, this is probably way too much information. And then I try really hard not to work once they've gone to bed. I try and fit everything into that very small 9 to 5. It is not enough time. I will never achieve everything on my to-do list, and I am totally okay with that right now. I can achieve more things later on. If I have my job, I'll do them. I'll achieve them in a few years. Other people might have a lot more, their lives might be a lot more organized, but ours is chaos and a nice relaxing intermission at work.
And then more chaos. Yeah.
I think for many people, as you get a little bit older, working at night and being focused and concentrating at night becomes incredibly hard compared to when you're in your 20s. And I find that even though I'm not a particularly good morning person, I try to wake up earlier in the morning sometimes, and wherever I can have an earlier start of the day and make the most of it in the first few hours of the day. So for example, I don't usually schedule, if we can avoid it, meetings in the mornings. I try to kind of keep that block until like 12 or 1 as much as possible free from meetings, and then keep those for when I can sleep in the afternoon during the meetings. I'm just joking, but I'm saying, you know, when I can be a little bit sharper in my head, I try to sort of focus on work, you know, writing basically, or so, yeah.
Great. It's really whatever works for everyone, right? It's really interesting to hear.
I think mine's pretty much the same as Eleanor's. It's like a little person gets into the bed at maybe anywhere between 4 and 5:30. So you could be getting kicked, someone's like snoring in your face, someone's asking you some inane question about how many stars are there in the sky, and you're like, it's 4:30, go to sleep. And so it's like disrupted sleep until about 6:30, then we're all up, then it's like a tornado and we get spat out. I take the kids to school, same as Eleanor, either I walk home and enjoy that moment of peace, I do some work at home, or I come into the office and enjoy that moment of peace. And then it's if they may last the day, because invariably every week there's some call from somewhere that something has happened, then collect them. My son does aftercare, which he loves. If I arrive early to school to collect him, he gets annoyed because he doesn't get the time with his friends. You can't win is the lesson there. Collect my little one, and then they're so tired at the end of the day. This is one of the things I've noticed. You get the worst of them, so they actually crumble at the end of the day, and they're so overwrought and like overstimulated, and a lot of the time there's fights and there's crying, and then the children are crying too, and you know, it's like you're trying to get dinner ready, get them to bed, get them to sleep, and then you get into bed, you fall asleep beside them, they kick you out, then they get up on the half hour asking for a drink of water, asking for this, asking for that, saying there's a monster under the bed, and then maybe by about 8:30 they're all asleep. And now if you can do work after that, fair play, but I can't. So I end up doing exercise or watching something on telly or just planning for the day, but I don't do any deep work at all anymore in the evenings because I'm just too tired. Yeah, And life's too short as well. Like, God, you know, I'm not a machine.
I think the positive takeaway out of all of this is both Maren and I, like, we get to work, we love it. So if anyone is concerned, like, going to work is amazing. Yeah, like, so if anyone's concerned about going back to work, it's actually, because I think it's twofold. Like, obviously we love our jobs and that's why we're pushing through like a research career, which is really hard to do. But also having a time for you where you are not a parent is also important. I think this is, yeah. And for me, like, being able to be an adult who is not just a mum is really important for me. And I really enjoy it. So for those of you who are considering it, going to work's really fun. Once
I love a good traffic jam. I love it. I just sit in the car and I'm like, this is amazing.
I remember many, many years ago, before anybody would dream that working from home would be a norm, in a meeting at the ANU in 2011, there was a discussion about flexible arrangements in working from home. And I sort of had to say, when I had 2 young children under 3, when I come to the office, I'm at home. I feel like I'm working from home. This is where I have my peace and quiet.
And you find as well with public holidays, the parents are all like, thank God we're back. And like, you know, we're not looking forward to the Monday when you're at home, and then you come in wrecked, just delighted to be in the office again.
And so do you think COVID has changed a lot with, I guess, improving access to working from home conditions and more flexibility then? Has that helped, or do you prefer coming into the office?
It's so hard. COVID is a really hard thing. I love the fact that there is more flexibility. I love the opportunity that if my child is sick, like she is right now, I can still be involved in something like this while she's upstairs with my husband for the 2 hours that I got off for this. I was like, I have to do this. So I love that aspect, and I love that it's become the norm. And this, I think, it creates a really nice, like, it's working towards inclusivity. The problem is that that you have the work-life creep, and the work-life creep is really hard, and it's because you want to do the things, right? And when your child is asleep at 6 a.m. and you get invited to an international meeting, you're like, yeah, that sounds like a great plan, but is that the right decision to do? Probably not. And so it's a double-edged sword. And I think it's something to be wary of, because I also hear of some parents saying, oh, I can just work from home and take care of my child at the same time. Like, for me, this is this is not the norm. If I have the opportunity to separate working and caring for my child, I will do that every single time, because you are not succeeding at both things if you're trying to do both at once. And so I think that is like the dangerous situation of the work from home aspect. But that's, yeah, other people might do it better than me. But yeah, I like separating.
Speaking of separation, just a related point in working in research globally, I suppose, is that increasingly for most of us, a lot of our collaborations are overseas, and therefore emails, work-related emails, don't come between 9 and 5. They come sort of any time of the day or night. Meetings occur any time of the day or night. So it's very hard to sort of apply this simple rule of I work 9 to 5 when so much of the work cycle occurs basically throughout, you know, the 24-hour. So it takes a little bit more planning and kind of thinking about how you manage it when you know. And for me, at least, it took a while before I reluctantly removed from my phone's home screen the email app, so I don't even see when an email comes in at 10 o'clock at night from somebody in the US. So yeah, it takes a little bit of you know, being committed to this idea.
We had another question that we prepared early, and a lot of you on the panel are sort of team leaders. So we're wondering, from a team leader perspective, what strategies or suggestions do you have for your staff, the people who work with you, who are also parenting? What have you put into place for them?
I don't have any staff in that position at the moment, so it's not something that I've had to deal with. But I know, like I said earlier, I think we have to be mindful of seeing colleagues who are, you know, embarking on that transition and, you know, being open and supporting them as well. I think there's a lot more we could do as collectives as well, in, you know, collaborating more, sharing more things, you know, rather than everyone trying to like advance on their own individually. Like we're much better together than like in opposition. So I'm definitely pro collaborating wherever possible and reaching out and getting people onto projects rather than trying to just go it alone. And I think that's again something that I only probably grew adjusted to because of having my children, realizing I can't do it all. And that's okay, because that means you're giving other people opportunities.
I too, none of my people have kids. So, but in terms of like maybe the aspect of, seeing colleagues, I think it is, I'm a very open person, which you can probably tell from the webinar. Everyone chooses to be quite different though. Some people prefer to keep their parenting journey very like totally separate from their work persona. And that was an active decision that I had to make when I first had my child, and I decided to go all in. Everyone gets to hear everything about my kids and my work. So my kids hear about my work, and my work people hear about my kids. So for me, that has been really helpful. And that also, I'm hoping that helps other people see both the challenges and the benefits and the fact that it's possible, because because you need the role models. And so I guess what we can do, and this is, I guess, the question where it was leading to, of how can we be good role models? I think talking about our experiences, sharing them in forums like this, which is great, gives people like the sense that it is possible, which I didn't have when I was thinking about being a first-time mum. So hopefully my people would know that if they chose to become parents. And obviously having a very active, my husband's very active dad as well, I would like, this goes both ways. Like this just opens me up for the possibility of paternity leave as well as maternity leave. So I guess living through these experiences is a really good thing, and hearing about these issues hopefully we'll pay it forward. Well, I know I will. I hope more broadly we will pay it forward.
Nadika, you have your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, can I just jump in and just let people know? I'm Nadika, by the way. So I do have team members who have kids and who are thinking of having kids as well. So one of the things I usually do is giving them the flexibility to work the way they want, not having quite strict rules or anything. So if they have to pick up kids or etc., and I go through the same thing with my kids. And the other thing is, so one of the other things I would probably do to empower and let them know it's okay to have kids. And I think a lot of things that we've sort of talked about, there's no timing. Another, I think, a point I would probably raise is giving them the opportunity. I think Miriam and everybody else has talked about giving them the opportunity to be in grants that you write and help them collaborate and empower if they don't have the capacity to do fellowships or leadership in groups, etc., but having them in grants and giving the opportunity. So those are sort of few tips I could share and jump in. Sorry to jump in, but I just thought I could share some of the tips. Thank you.
Great to hear from you. And Celia?
Yes, so I'm not talking as a leader, but I'm more talking about seeing things from the other side. For me, it was really important to see my team leader, telling us in the middle of the day, I got a call from school and I have to go and pick up my son, or leaving earlier in the evening to pick up his kids, because I knew, as Eleanor was saying just before, he was a role model and he was showing me that it was possible, and I knew that it meant it would be okay for me to do it, or for Julien to do it. And yes, I guess that made things much easier for me. It was also much easier to tell him about the pregnancy, to talk to him about, like when I go back to work, if I need to have some flexibility, I know that it's going to be okay, because sometimes he shows that he needs that flexibility too. And him also showing that he would respect, whatever decision we would make about our parenting. So I remember him asking me about childcare, like, did we start looking for childcare? And then he apologized for asking me that question, because he said, oh, I'm not meant to ask you about childcare because maybe you want to take a long time of maternity leave and you're not thinking about childcare yet. And I thought it was really important for him to show me that I could do whatever I wanted with my parenting journey. So yes, I think it's very important as leaders to show that it's possible.
Great. Just mindful of the time. Do we have any final questions from the audience members? Of course, there's the Q&A box. So if you have any burning questions in the last few minutes, if you could pop them in there.
Steph, can I just sort of talk a little bit to the panelists and ask about how much they reach out to mentors? And at the same time, plug in that the Accelerator group, we actually have a mentorship program that we run every year. And that's one of the ways you could reach out to mentors, and we pair up with either your choice if we can find, or we will try and pair up to potential and appropriate mentors for you. So I'm quite keen to sort of hear from the panelists whether they reach out to mentors when they need, or whether they have specific mentors other than their supervisors who could help them throughout to get by if they're spiraling down, etc. Thank you.
Well, I reach out to my mentors all the time. When I first moved across to Sydney, this was one of the things that I really wanted to do because I didn't understand how the Australian academic system worked, ironically, because even though I'd done my PhD in Perth, Sydney's a whole new ballgame. And so I was really active in trying to find some good mentors, but it's a lot harder than it sounds. And so I actually found some great mentors through organized programs, such as like the one that you're talking about sounds great. And so I found that useful. It's a bit hit and miss though. Sometimes you get paired up with someone who's not a great mentor. So don't feel bad about, it's kind of relationships, right? If you get a bad one, you just part nicely. Or like when I say bad, it just means that it's not someone who is giving you, who can help you with the specific questions you need. But reaching out, just find role models and see if they can answer your questions that you're interested in. And sometimes that turns into a more long-term mentoring arrangement. But yes, I talk to mine all the time. I have two of them, which I discuss with, who are not my supervisor. I discuss a whole range of issues, ironically not parenting, but yeah, a whole range of like, how do I navigate being a junior academic and that kind of stuff.
One of my sort of, I don't know if regrets, but one of my reflections on my journey is that I would have loved to have a more structured approach to identifying and reaching out and being supported in sort of contacting mentors. Some of my colleagues who are in the US, I get the impression that the whole mentorship culture is a little bit more built in to their way of thinking, at least from the impressions I get. And maybe it's partly my own style of being kind of sort of quite driven and sort of focused on how I want to do things, and focusing on building my research program by myself from a relatively early stage. I think I would have benefited a lot from along the way having some regular mentors that are not supervisors, but people who I share with some other important elements of the journey, and that I can benefit from their experience. And I would encourage young researchers to really, really focus on kind of identifying those mentorships early on.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of similar. I sort of forged my own path a bit, but I did reach out to more senior women and men who I just thought have done particular things very well. And then it's less about having a mentor as such. It's more getting very strategic advice on certain aspects that I thought I could benefit or I needed work on. As I said earlier, I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was getting onto an academic women in leadership course at UNSW, which had it was like a full year, and you had to commit, you know, a day every month or something, and they had targeted coaching, and that really built me back up into, you know, identifying what I needed, pairing me with a coach, with a mentor, but also with a peer support group that ended up being much more valuable than really the more senior mentor. And I think it's finding those good core people who, you know, are like-minded and that you can talk openly with. They may not give you you know, they may not put you on a grant, but at least it's normalizing the frustrations and the anxieties and the fears that you have, and actually reassuring you that, you know, you're on the right track and everything will be okay. And then I think looking to maybe outwardly to get more strategic or tactical kind of support from people that you've identified as that you trust and that you feel their career journey and their ethos, I guess, matches with how you want to conduct yourself. Because there are many successful people out there that I certainly don't want to be like. And so it's identifying, you know, the race that you do want to run and how you want to get there.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We're mindful of the time, and a special thanks to our panel members for a great discussion. And we hope that our EMCRs have gained insight from your experiences. And a recording of this webinar will be uploaded onto the ADNeT YouTube channel. Thank you all again, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everyone.